Area 10, good to talk to you. I'm just checking in with you in a midweek check-in. Some thoughts about coronavirus, where we're at as a culture. It's weird because nobody can predict the future. Anyone who tells you they know exactly how this is all going to play out in the next few months is probably lying to you or a little overconfident. So I don't know either. I'm trying to discern what is the Lord up to in my life for our church and trying to be pretty hyper local about how I'm thinking about it. Like what do I need to do? What does my family need to do? What does the church need to do? As I think about some of these things, I notice a sense of anxiety kicks up in me a little bit. I get anxious about an unknown future. And I was thinking about anxiety sort of generally. The word anxious comes from a Latin word which means to choke, which is great because anxiety can feel like you're choking on it. Sometimes it feels that way. But I also thought about ways that I'm less anxious right now than maybe I was months ago. One silly little example is I remember when my wife would ask me to pick up toilet paper from the grocery store years ago. You walk into the grocery store aisle and the toilet paper aisle it's really overwhelming. It has one job that you think it would be really simple just to get toilet paper, but there's all these options about 2-ply and 3-ply and different brands and how many rolls per package and the thickness of the rolls, and do they have lotion in them or do they have patterns on them to look pretty, and it's so much, and I just want toilet paper. And so I get this anxiety of like, I'm going to get the wrong thing, and what's exactly the kind, and I can never remember. I'm like, do we get the quilted northern or the Scott or I don't remember. So there's anxiety because of all the choices, and that's not so unusual to me. Choice anxiety is a real thing, that we get overwhelmed by the options. I have noticed that lately in the toilet paper aisle, it's a lot easier. It's empty. It looks like a bunch of empty shelves. It looks like Bulgaria in 1950 or something. It's like all the stories of my childhood that you hear about communism and people not being able to get toilet paper. It's like, well, there's kind of nothing there on the shelves. So it keeps it simple. And if there is something, you're like, oh, I guess I'll buy the one brand that happens to be here so we can have some toilet paper. So anxiety, maybe in some ways I'm less anxious. And there are certainly things in the times we're living right now bring more anxiety, uncertainty about the future, uncertainty about maybe your job or money or your health, what's going to happen to you or to people that you love. There's certainly all those uncertainties that can bring anxiety. And then there's some ways that we're less anxious. There's less social anxiety, I suppose, because there's less social connection right now. Who cares if those jeans fit or look good, because you're just wearing sweatpants, I guess, so it's like, well, if I'm not going out. So it seems to me there's kind of levels of anxiety, or another word for anxiety is fear, right? If there's levels of anxiety or fear, some of them are good and some of them aren't. And part of it is, what are you afraid of or what are you anxious about? The source of that is a big deal. This reminds me of Mark chapter 4. Jesus is with his disciples and they go out onto a lake. And it's an anxiety-producing moment for his disciples, who are his followers, and they're afraid. But I want you to notice something, because I heard someone talk about this, and it really jumped out at me. Notice what they're actually afraid about in this account. Mark 4, verse 35, on that day when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." So they're on the Sea of Galilee. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in a boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" So obviously they're freaking out, they're anxious, they're afraid because they're in a boat, they know how this works. You're on a boat in the Sea of Galilee, it's a fairly wide sea. They're about to capsize, they're going to die. Like, it's terrible. They look at Jesus, he's asleep. And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" Let me just stop there for a second. When Jesus sees them, he says, "Why are you so like afraid? Why are you anxious? And if I'm there, I'm going, well, why I'm afraid and why I'm anxious, because this is terrifying. We don't know what's about to happen. We're gonna, we might die, or we're all gonna die. Like all that kind of stuff is kicked up in them. And he's like, no, you're lacking faith. You're afraid. Why are you afraid of this? And then notice what it says in verse 41, the very next verse. And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? So they started the story afraid of the wind and the waves. Jesus handles that. And then they're afraid of him. They're sitting there going, whoa, hold on. This guy just spoke to the wind and it stopped. Like, who is this guy? And there was a fear there. Now, not all fear is bad, and this tells me that not all fear is bad. He rebukes them for lacking faith and the fear of the natural thing that was occurring. You're afraid of the wind, you're afraid of the waves. He doesn't, not that we know of, he doesn't rebuke them for being afraid of him, because fear in that sense can be something like a very healthy respect or a reverence or an awe. And that's what they were fearing. And that's what they were feeling, it seems like. They have this immense respect. The disciples, and those of us who are followers of Jesus, we are supposed to be marked by our faith. Faith is where it's at. But one of the things this tells me is that even faith can have a little bit of fear in it. And maybe it needs to have a little bit of fear in it, and that's okay. So I want us to think about that as we are up against, as a I was going to say as a culture, but really as the world, we are up against a virus, and there's a lot of unknowns there, and the unknowns bring uncertainty, and the uncertainty brings fear in us. And I just want us to think through our fears a little bit, and what am I afraid of, and what really should I be afraid of? Who really has power here? I think about that all the time when disasters are predicted and people are really upset. I think about what are we really afraid of? Where's the power really at? And I'm somewhat comforted to know that it's okay to be afraid, and it's okay as long as that fear is placed on the right things. Fear of the Lord is a right and a good thing. So who knows how this ends? Who knows how the uncertainty will get all wrapped up and we'll get back to normal lives? Maybe we can, maybe we can start making plans again for the future. For now, while we're in this space, I'm trying to think locally and think about the people around me in this church and my family and friends. And I keep going, so when I feel anxious, I keep going back to reading the scripture. I'm so glad that the Lord led us to do Core 52 this year, where we're reading together as a church. No matter what, we've got these books in our hands and we're reading through the year. I've enjoyed reading. Acts chapter 1 was this morning. So I'm still reading. I got a new journal, and I've been writing in that and still praying. We actually, you'll hear more about this weekend, but we've put together and we're building a prayer garden in the front of our property that people can walk by and pray and submit prayer requests. And we're doing a prayer walk through Carytown. So we're trying to double down on those things in such an uncertain time. And by doing that, hopefully it helps us to be less anxious and to remember who really has the power and is in control. So hopefully that's helpful to you this week. We are in a storm of a kind, but we serve a God who actually can literally just speak to it and calm it if he chooses to. So I find that comforting to know who really has the power here and where my fears really should be. And I'm hopeful that this wraps up soon, and that everybody can go back to being anxious about the number of choices of toilet paper that you have. That'll be great. So, all right, have a great week, guys. Hope to catch up with you this weekend or in small groups or at classes or anything. God bless. Take care.